Good morning guys, and welcome to our last inquiry lesson for this week. Now this is actually our last inquiry lesson until we start to try and unpick the question of the inquiry and go on to our challenge as we're coming towards the end of this inquiry now. So we obviously have half term next week, but the week after we'll be completing our challenge for this inquiry. So this lesson is actually really important for your challenge that you will be doing in that first week back. Okay, so in this lesson you will need a pencil or something to write with, and also a printout or a copy. I'm going to attach this to Dojo, so hopefully maybe you can write straight onto the worksheet on Dojo, or if not you can draw the table out in your exercise book. I will show you, I've got a copy of this bigger, so if you are going to copy this out then you can, I've got a bigger screen for you to copy that from, so don't worry about copying this small little picture of it there. Okay, so in this lesson we are learning to explore renewable energy. Sorry, ignore the date today, this was because this is when it was taught in school. This should be obviously the 11th of February. So we are learning to explore renewable energy. So I've got a quick wordy warm-up for you here, and our word is renewable. Now we've been learning lots of different key vocabulary in this inquiry, so our next one, if we were in school, we'll add this to our inquiry wall. We'd have all our different vocabulary up that we've learned. I will recap this in our first week back, all the different words that you've learned. So renewable, you might know what that means, you might not have ever heard of it before. Now renewable sources are natural ones such as wind, water and sunlight, and they are always available. So if something's renewable, it means that you can kind of reuse it again. Okay, so we're going to link that to energy. We've learned lots about energy. We learned that we get energy from with energy we get electricity and things like that. We've learned that there's good energy and there's bad energy for the environment, really. So what we're going to learn about today is something called renewable energy, and I know lots of you would know about this already, okay, because I know lots of the children in school already knew about this already as well. So let me just move myself down here. So we've spoke about what we remember about energy. Okay, so what we're going to do, so obviously we know that we need energy is produced from electricity, heat and transport. Okay, now what were some of our energy saving tips, and have we been doing them? So I discussed this in our inquiry the other day, and you guys went round and did an audit of your houses to make sure that you are using energy efficiently. And I know some of you were telling me you're a little bit embarrassed about how much energy you use, and I know I was the same when I went round with my house, and when I spoke to the children in school they couldn't believe how much energy we use and kind of waste in school. So even in school they're doing little conscious things to make sure that we're trying to save energy when we don't need it, and hopefully you guys are doing the same around your house as well. So those are things like turning off the lights when you're not in the room, not having TVs on in the background, if you've got the heating on, not opening the windows and the doors, little things like that. And we're doing the same in school as well, so make sure that you keep doing this because it's really important for saving energy and saving the environment. Now let's have a think. What is non-renewable energy? So we're learning to explore renewable energy. So what we're going to look at first is non-renewable energy. And I know you guys have heard about these before. We've discussed these before. So non-renewable energy comes from natural resources that are not naturally replenished. Okay, so it means you can't get them back naturally. So those are things like oil and coal. So that's this obviously shows kind of a power plant here, and oil, that's the use of oil and the use of coal. Okay, now we use that for things like driving in our cars, and lots and lots of other things. And the energy and the waste that comes from using oil and coal, as you know, is really bad for the environment. All you've got to do is look at this here. That goes out into the environment, goes up past out of the earth into something called the ozone layer, which is outside of the earth, and it heats up. So that's why we talk about our planet heating up, is because of the use of coal and oil, which is non-renewable energy. So we need coal and oil if we want to get things like electricity, if we want fuel, if we want heat. However, people have been using it for those reasons. People started using that back a long time ago, and they didn't realize how bad it was for the environment. But as you can tell, it's non-renewable, and it heats up the environment, and it contributes to something that we spoke about before called global warming. So these types of energy here, the energy that comes from these here, isn't very good for the environment. So for that reason, people have tried to find energy that is more renewable, so better for the environment. Because obviously we can't stop using things like cars, we can't stop using electricity, we need it now, we all rely on it. So what they've done instead is they've tried to create things that are that create energy that's better for the environment than using things like coal, and they're called fossil fuels. Okay, so we want to try and stop using fossil fuels, and hopefully you remember that from some of our previous lessons. So, renewable energy comes from natural sources that are naturally replenished. We can get them naturally, such as sunlight, wind, and waves. So, hopefully, already you can start to think about some renewable energy that uses those things. Okay, so here's one, wind turbines. And here's another, solar panels. And I know the children in school, and hopefully you guys know this as well, we've actually got these solar panels on the top of our school, on the roof of our school. So we try to use as much of our energy from the sun. Okay, so it's the same with these here. The wind blows these turbines and it generates energy, and then we can use things like electricity and stuff like that. And it's the exact same with the solar panels. However, we use sunlight instead. Okay, so what's great is that we use these in school already. So as a school, we're already trying to be more efficient, and we're trying to use better renewable energy that's better for the environment. So we know that, so we should remember this from last week's lesson, we know that we use energy for heat, transport and electricity. Okay, we need energy for those things to work. Okay, so what are the different sources of renewable energy that has been introduced? Before, like I said, to get energy we had to use fossil fuels, coal and oil and things like that, whereas now they've come up with some new ones. So we've just discussed two there. We discussed solar energy. So solar energy comes from the sun. Okay, so that's why they're called solar panels. That's what we've got on the top of the school. So the sun can be used to give us heat energy. So solar panels are used to convert sunlight into electricity. So in the school, we use the sunlight to make our electricity that we use in school. And it's the same with any other place that uses solar panels. Okay, these things here. Quite often in school as well, obviously, we're not in school for very long in the time that we'll have the most sun. So obviously in the summer we spend 6 weeks not actually in school. And what's really great about solar panels, and this I know is something that the school does, is any energy we get from the sun in the 6 weeks holidays we can sell on to other people for them to use that instead of using fossil fuels, so we don't waste any energy. Okay, so what we're going to discuss now is we're going to discuss some of the positives and negatives to using all the different types of renewable energy. Now, you have your table, your picture that I would like you to write on, and I would like you to do this more so towards the end of the lesson. However, if you've got that downloaded now, if I go back to, so I'm talking about this piece of work here, if you can get that up, you might want to do this alongside me now, or you can try and remember these and then you can do this at the end if you want to, or you can just write some notes. So if we go back to our solar energy, so what we're going to discuss now is what are some of the positives and negatives to using solar energy. So let's start with the positives. It's great for the environment. Okay, it uses a renewable source that is bad for the environment. Okay, that's one really good thing about solar energy. It comes from the sun. Okay, so quite often the sun tries to come out most days. Okay, so it comes from the sun, so there's nothing that we have to it's all natural. Okay, we don't have to use any oil or anything like that. We obviously use it. It's positive is that we can use it for our electricity, which is great. Another positive is that we can sell it if you don't use it all ourselves, like what we do in school, so you don't have to waste any of it. Okay, now if we go on to the negatives, one major negative I think about quite often is that obviously we live in England, and do we have sun all the time in England? No. Okay, that's one issue with solar panels. If you lived somewhere like maybe Australia or maybe in Spain, somewhere like that, solar panels work great because obviously they have lots more sun than we do. However, unfortunately, we are not always blessed with the weather. Sometimes we are, but not always. So sometimes, and obviously through the winter months, we can't tend to get much electricity from the solar panels because we obviously need sunlight. So we can't always rely on having the sunlight. So that's one major negative with solar energy. Now, The next renewable source we're going to think about is something called wind energy. So we did speak about this briefly before, and that links to wind turbines. Obviously, these are wind turbines here. I know some schools try to use wind turbines. The secondary school that I went to, they bought a wind turbine when I was there. So that was one really good thing that the school did then. So we're trying to use more renewable energy in lots of different schools. Now, wind turbines are used to convert wind energy to electricity. So just like the solar panels use sunlight, wind turbines do the exact same thing, however they use the wind, okay? And the wind blows the blades around, and this movement, so as the blades do this movement is converted into electricity, okay? So a group of wind turbines is called a wind farm. So whenever you're driving around, you might have come across these. I know I've seen them quite a few times before if I've been driving. So you might see lots of wind turbines all together, and they're actually called a wind farm. And they're really, really good for the environment because obviously it's renewable source and it's natural and it doesn't use anything that's bad for the environment. I know places, somewhere like up in Scotland where it's really, really windy, they use lots there. They're quite often put out at sea because it's windier where in the sea, so it's windier. They're obviously not too deep out, but they quite often are put out there because it's obviously windier and it can generate more electricity. Now, again, you might want to move on to the next one now in your table if you're doing this alongside me. What are the positives and negatives? Now, you can try and think of, you can pause me here and you can have a think, or we can go through these together. Now, a positive, again, much like solar energy, is that it's good for the environment. Okay, it's all natural, so we don't have to use anything. It doesn't give off any energy that's not very good for the environment, so it's all natural sources. Okay, another thing that's good for it is obviously it uses the weather, so we don't have to do anything that I don't have to use anything with it that isn't bad for the environment, which is really, really good. It just uses the weather, a bit like the solar panels, so similar positives there. I'm not sure how expensive they are, so that could maybe be a challenge for both the wind energy and solar energy. You can go and have a look to see whether they're expensive. They might be quite cheap, they might be or they might be expensive. So and I think there's the same with solar panels. You can sell on any energy that you don't use as well, which is good. Now, obviously, a negative could be, is it always really, really windy? I know I feel like lately it's been quite windy here, but I think maybe more so than sunlight, there's a bit more wind, but you do need to use a lot of wind for it to create a lot of energy. So if you live somewhere like in Scotland where it is windier, you obviously get lots and lots of energy from it. However, if you live somewhere where it's not as windy, obviously they're not going to be as helpful because you do need a lot of wind to be able to produce enough energy for the electricity that we need. Okay, so those are some of the positives and negatives. What you can do as a bit of a challenge if you want to is you can type up using your laptops, you can type up some of the positives and negatives if you want to add some more as well. Now, the next two, I think there's two more pieces of renewable energy that we're going to go through. I actually kind of want you to do these two independently. Now, if you've done those with me, you can actually have a go and you can use your laptop to try and find out some information about what the positives and negatives are for these next bits of renewable energy. So this one here is called hydroenergy. So hydropower, hydroenergy, is the energy that comes from moving water, just like this over here. So the water flows down the fast flowing rivers and it's used to spin turbines that generate electricity. Okay, so that could be like the turbines that are in the sea. The water flows down and it spins turbines and then that creates our electricity. And the movement of big waves at sea can also be used to generate the energy. Okay, so huge big waves, obviously that kind of needs wind as well, but huge big waves create our energy and create the electricity. So what you're going to do is you can pause me here and have a think. Obviously, one of the real positives is that obviously, again, it doesn't use anything that's bad for the environment. It's all natural sources. But spend some time now, maybe typing it in on Google and having a think about what the positives and negatives are from this piece of renewable energy. Okay, and then you can write it down into your chart. You might know these instantly, or you might think, oh, I might have to have a little bit more help with that. And finally, our final one is something called nuclear energy. Okay, so nuclear power stations use uranium as fuel to make electricity. Uranium is a natural resource taken from the ground, so it is not renewable. Okay, so that's something that's really, really interesting here. But the nuclear power doesn't produce as much as much waste, so it's a very clean way of generating energy. So although uranium isn't a natural source and is not renewable, okay, it doesn't produce much waste. So my dad was telling me lots about nuclear energy because I was a little bit unsure about what nuclear energy was. And I think the uranium gets so hot, and that heat that comes off of the uranium is able to produce electricity. Okay, so a bit like what happens with coal and oil, it gets super hot and that produces electricity. However, so uranium does something similar. However, uranium doesn't produce the same amount of bad energy that's bad for the environment as coal and oil does. So although it's not renewable, it's still much better for the environment. Okay, so and my dad knows lots about this, and he seems to think that this one is the best one because it can produce lots of electricity. So what I would like you to do now is, again, go through and think about what the positives and negatives are. So we've already discussed some there. Positives are that is, although it's not renewable, it's still much better for the environment because it doesn't produce as much waste. Okay, the negatives could be, I'm talking about how maybe it does produce just a little bit of waste, I guess, but not lots. A negative could be that it's not renewable, so maybe you don't think is that good for the environment. I think another positive is it's easier to get more electricity from it than it is with things like wind and sun, because with wind turbines and solar panels, we need to rely on the wind and the sun. However, with the uranium, you don't have to have to rely on anything with that apart from just having the uranium. So maybe that's a positive with it as well. So what you're going to do with this sheet here, if you've already been doing this alongside me, then that's absolutely fine. If you've not started this yet, then you can start this now. You can go back through the video and try and pick out some of the positives and negatives that I spoke about, particularly for these two. But for these final two, I want you to kind of try and do this independently. So like I said, you can use Google, you can type it in. I'm sure you'll find out lots and lots of information, probably more information that even I know. Okay, and then write them down, bullet point them. So here's the positives, here's the negatives, bullet point them, and then when you're done, send a picture in and you can tell me all about it, which is fantastic. I've not included the names, so you might want to put the names in. Obviously I've included pictures. However, these are the solar panels, the wind turbines, the hydroenergy, and the nuclear energy. It is in order as well. So have a look through, have a look at what the positives and negatives are for all these bits of renewable energy. Now remember, renewable energy is the thing that's saving the planet. It means that we can still use electricity and we can still drive our cars. Obviously, people are trying to use more electric cars now, which are better for the environment, and we can still get heat. However, it means we're not destroying the planet as much as we were if we were using coal and oil. Remember, those are called fossil fuels. So as a civilization now, we're trying to move away from using fossil fuels because they're bad for the environment, and we're trying to use these more renewable energies. But obviously we want to know what's good about them and also what's bad about them. So I really look forward to seeing your work. So good luck.